Hey, what is going on, Dave? Dr. Dave, what's up, man?
Joe, how you doing, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing very, very well, man. I'm excited to see you.
I'm excited to see you too, man. Looking
All
good on
right.
that beachy, balmy background. I'm
Yeah, I
squinting my
know.
eyes
I
because the
wish I
sun's so
was
bright.
there. I wish I was there, really. I know you can see the kind of the sun shining off
Yeah.
the top of
Oh,
my
I
head
thought that
too,
was the
right?
sun. Never mind.
All right, so enough of that, but
Uh,
we're excited to be here again. Thank you for all of you tuning in to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, where me and my co-host Dr. Dave, we try and solve all the world's problems, right? So we
all the
keep
birds and
coming back.
butterflies have been saved.
We keep coming back week after week. But in all seriousness, we do enjoy this. We really are get excited about coming on here and sharing all of our journeys together. So to make us all better. So with that, like we do in our traditional fashion, one of us introduces the topic, and then the other one jumps in feet first and gets us going down that path. So with that, this week's topic is seeing others. So
Seeing
what does that
others.
really mean? Seeing others, right?
Seeing
What does that mean
others.
to you,
Seeing others.
Dr. Dave?
Let me put my glasses on here for a second. Okay, there we go. All right, seeing. Oh, there you are. There. I thought you were on the other screen, but you're right there in the middle screen. So, yeah, seeing others. Aside from the olfactory, no, the olfactory. That's something else. The visual perspective.
Right,
So,
right.
olfactory is definitely not visual. So from aside from the visual perspective and wearing glasses and contacts, seeing others for who they really are, what they really are, how they want to be seen, and I think we can even maybe interweave a little bit of respect in there and just saying respecting others for
Right.
being themselves and who
Absolutely.
they are. So, yeah, seeing others, wow, that is such a deep and important topic and very relevant, especially today. And it probably always has been, but it seems more relevant than ever, is seeing others as they want to be seen and how they prefer to be seen and respecting them for that. So to me, wow, this topic could go so
Right,
many ways
right.
down so many paths. So to me, seeing others is pretty much just that. It's getting to know people and understanding what they like and what they don't like, and what they're willing to share about what they like and don't like, either about themselves, about other things, about topics in general. And to me, that kind of starts bringing in the point of finding those common points of interest so you can actually have these conversations. And then once that trust has been built up, it may take a few moments, it may take several days or weeks or months, but once that trust is built up, then you can start exploring these things and learning to get to know each other and how we like to be received and perceived for that matter. So for me, I was not the brightest bunny in the bush growing up in high school. I mean, I probably was. I was probably more bored than anything. But when I got out of the military and started going to school in the latter part of my military career, I enjoyed being perceived as someone who was knowledgeable. Because
Right.
for many years I was not perceived as that. And so now, we've achieved a certain level of proficiency and I enjoy being looked up to. It makes me feel good about myself and it makes me feel good about myself to help others. So when I want to be the way I want to be seen is someone who, when I speak, I should have a fairly good idea what I'm talking about. And if I don't, then I own it. And
Right.
along with those lines, the other side of that coin is that when I'm seeing others, if I make a mistake, I own up to it. I don't dwell upon it. I find out how I can correct myself, and then I apologize and press forward because no one is perfect, including myself. And I tend to be on the side of trying to err on the side of caution and humbleness because of that fact. When I encounter someone who believes that they know everything, I'm respectful to them. I give the nice courteous head nod, and and let them have their perspectives, because we're responsible for ourselves ultimately.
Right.
And
Right.
part of that being responsible for ourselves is respecting others, because if I'm not respecting someone else, I cannot expect them to respect me.
Right.
So
Right.
that I'll start with that, and then I'm tossing the proverbial ball back into your side of the court, or the other side of the net, or whatever those sports analogies are, because I'm not eloquent in sports at all,
Okay.
aside
Well,
from horseshoes.
I received that that passing of that the ball. So I just want to start off by saying, we often get hung up with our own thing. We often get caught
That's a
up
good one.
in yeah, what we think is important, and we often fail to recognize those other people around us. So we
Mm,
fail to see others.
yeah.
And kind of down the line of where you were going, where you talked about, seeing others through yourself, basically,
Mhm.
because you want to you want to see others, or others to see you as you see them, and so the
Right.
respect that you give them is what you expect in return. But I think a lot of us struggle with not really seeing each other, not really,
Yeah.
even when we, and I think you might have said in one of the previous episodes about, when you go to wave your hand up and say, hey, and they go right past you like they don't see
Mm,
you.
mm,
It's that, recognizing other people. You talked about it, getting to really know people, getting to
mhm.
understand who they are. That's, I think, one of the biggest disconnects we have with especially in a leadership position or leadership
Yeah.
role. That's one of the biggest disconnects we have, and wonder why we don't get the best out of people, because we don't get to know them. We don't get to understand who they are and how they see things. And
Yeah.
so oftentimes we overlook when they're not feeling great, or when
Mhm.
they're not happy, because we haven't taken the time to get to know them.
Yeah.
And I heard this about 6 months ago from a speaker, and it just really resonated with me. It stuck with me. And he said, as a leader, or even as a team member, if you don't know who is in the passenger seat and in the back seat of someone that you work with, a co-worker, if you don't know the names of those individuals that person holds dear, then you really don't know them.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very powerful, because if people are coming to work every day, have issues and concerns, and you don't know what's giving them, what's leading to them having problems or concerns, then you can't help them or assist them. So that's
Yeah.
why I thought that was very important as a leader, as a team member, just getting to really know people, and going beyond just, hey Jim, how's your day,
Yeah.
but rather, hey, how's the family,
Mhm.
did your kid, how'd they do in that game last week, or how'd they do on that project you were talking about. Really getting to know people, and seeing people, I think that's
Yeah.
very important. But
Yeah. You said several things, and one of the things that you and I discuss a lot is trying, and there's a lot of emphasis on trying to see others through their eyes the way that they want to be
right.
seen.
Yep.
And we put a lot of extra emphasis on trying, because we cannot feasibly see someone through their eyes. Realistically, we
Right.
can't,
Yep.
because we have not been
Yep.
on their journey, but we
Yep.
can absolutely do our damnedest to try to see things through their eyes the way they want to be seen.
Right. Yep.
And we're not going to necessarily hit it out of the park every time, but if we make that very conscious, concerted effort, we
Yep.
should, operative word being should come close to hitting our mark. And
Right.
that's where I think a lot of people fall short.
Right.
They tend to get people tend to get overly wrapped up into what they're doing and their level of perceived importance, and versus taking that moment just to look up and acknowledge someone. And sometimes, as we've talked about this in the past, sometimes that brief moment in time to look up and give a subtle head nod or a wave or a smile will be the thing that absolutely changes the direction of someone's life or their day or that moment and can put them back
Absolutely.
on track. Those little
Absolutely.
things, to your point, how's the family instead of how's the weather? How'd that project turn out instead of
Right.
how's the
Yep.
weather? Um, little things like that. Some people don't want to get overly personal. So find out what that common point of interest, how's that car coming along? How's that project coming along?
Right.
And other people are more than willing to share about family, to your point, how the game turned out, how are the kids doing, how are the grandkids doing, how
Right.
mom, dad. So we cannot approach seeing others through our eyes and through our perspective. We have to take a few moments out, if nothing else, take a few moments out and give them that respect and courtesy that they deserve. And we need to not only hear, but intently and purposely listen to what they have to say. It is
I,
only then that we can start to come close to
right.
forming a
Right.
relationship and having that mutual respect for one another.
And that's kind of where I was just going to try and interject, but you said it earlier, have taking that, making that a really conscious effort to understand, to learn, to hear, to see,
Mhm.
versus like you said, just saying, "Hey, how's the weather?" or just checking a
Yeah.
box of, "Hey, I was cordial."
Yeah.
It's much deeper than that, and like
Yeah.
you said, we won't ever get to the point where we see things exactly through their eyes or the way they see it,
Mhm.
but we can probably get close enough that we can empathize and that we can have a better understanding
Yeah.
of maybe how they see it or how they view it. And that's what it's all about, putting
Yeah.
ourselves in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
And I think that's lacking in a lot of cases because, we talked about this before. Um, we didn't grow up with a silver spoon.
Yeah.
So for us to expect someone who what did grow up that way, for us to expect them to understand what it was like to live that life, that's not fair,
Mhm.
because they didn't experience it, they
Yeah.
didn't see it. Even when we talk about being in the military, and then people who haven't been in the military, again, they have not experienced it, so we can
Mhm.
only try to explain what it's like, and based on how they receive it or perceive it, they still may not have a good understanding of that.
Yeah.
But so the best we can do is to try and see it as closely through their eyes as we can. And
Mhm.
so really listening and really paying attention to what the message they're trying to uh, relate to us. So I think
Yeah.
that's just
And
very
we need to
important.
understand also, and I'm going to piggyback on things that you've been alluding to, and that is the trust factor. And when we
Right.
talk about walking down the highway and looking up and giving the nod or the wave and acknowledging someone else, that's not to check a box. That's taking a split second, those 2 or 3 seconds, to genuinely acknowledge those individuals. Not just
Right.
saying, yeah, I waved to 25 people today. My quote has been met. That's not
Right.
what this is
Right.
about.
Right. Yep.
Oh, I acknowledge everyone every day. Do you really
Right.
acknowledge, truly acknowledge them
Absolutely.
for
Yep.
who they are? Or are you checking the box and counting how many people you've waved to on your
Yep.
team?
Yep.
So, and that does take trust. It takes trust in yourself. It takes trust in knowing who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. And it's building that trust with that other individual. And I'm going to use you and I as an example. You mentioned our upbringing and what some of our viewers can obviously tell that we're not twins, but for our listeners, it would, as we've mentioned so many times in the past, if you haven't seen us, we could almost be twins. I mean, our hair color is different, but we wear glasses. We're almost the same age. It's kind of a weird twinsy scenario, but you know, even then, Joe and I went through many, many, many trust building conversations where we gave a little and received a little, gave a little and received a little. And now, because of the richness and the depth of the conversations that we have, we can have conversations that most people shy away from. And
Right.
that's not a good, bad, or indifferent, but it does attest to sometimes that it does take time to get there. Just
Right.
because
Yep.
we're ready to jump in and get to know someone and air quotes see them doesn't mean that they're ready or willing to accept
Right.
our
Absolutely.
assertiveness. And
Yep.
we must absolutely pause in that moment until they are comfortable sharing with us, and we've
Right.
established that trust, not checking the box of, hey Joe, how's the family, we're at this level now. Joe might be thinking, hell no, we're not at that level, you need to pump the brakes a little bit, we're not
Right.
there yet,
Right.
buddy. So just because we believe we're at that level, that has nothing to do with anything. It's up to that person to say, I'm ready to go there. And
Right.
that's what seeing people is about, is meeting them halfway and then pausing and being patient until they're ready, and
Well,
vice versa.
so I'll bring up a scenario and why it's important to choose that route or choose that path when you're meeting new people, for example.
Mm,
So, and I've had this experience more than once where I've, been selected as a leader for an or for a group of people, right? And so the person that was there before starts to try and pass on the information they know about that team that they're no longer associated with. They think they're trying to assist me or help
mm,
me by providing me with this information,
right, right.
right? So my practice is to I listen to them, I hear them, uh,
Mm,
but I don't allow that to cloud my judgment on my first impression or my
mm,
interaction with that individual because they already have they've already formed their opinion or idea of that individual, and I don't want that to cloud my judgment or my
mm,
experience with that individual. So I basically, it's a clean slate when
yeah.
I meet that new team, so that I don't have these preconceived ideas and notions of who those people are. So
Mm,
again, I listen to it or I hear it, but I reserve my right to form my own opinion of that,
mm,
and for me, that's worked out great because I've gotten advice or comments about people or
mm,
things, and after getting to know that person and really getting to see them, I understand that that was their perception of them, that
mm,
was their idea of them, and so I've done that often so that I don't uh, treat people unfairly or see them
yeah,
unfairly in light of somebody else's eyes. I try to
yeah,
use my own, and so that's for me. That's a good example of how I see them, the way I need to see them, and not give someone else's predescribed or their version of what they think that person is, because they're using their own perception, their own experiences, their own opinion of that individual, and I try not to allow that to affect my version of what I see in that person.
yeah. And thank you for sharing that, Joe, because some of the things and experiences that we share can be very deep to Joe and I, and we're not very forthcoming about everything because there's not a reason to be forthcoming about everything. But when we share certain experiences about our past, it's very deliberate. One of the attempts I had made, and I'm going to say failed pretty miserably, was about midway through my career. I was at an airport, and I'd met someone at the airport, and we were discussing one of the projects I was working on, and the project was focused on a very big figurehead in history. And I had we started a conversation, and it seemed to be going well, and I had put in my perspective on this individual, and it was a positive perspective, but there was a barrier there because the other individual didn't understand the perspective I was taking. The definition had not been clarified on the terminology, and I actually wound up offending that person, very much so, inadvertently. And that is a life lesson that I carry very close and near and dear to my heart, to ensure that I remain humble, patient, and very open minded. Because as much as I was trying not to offend someone, I did inadvertently. And that is it, when that happens, if you're paying attention and you're really true and honest with yourself, it can be painful for
Absolutely.
both
Yeah.
individuals. Um, and at that point, because it was such a short duration, the apology was not enough.
Right.
unfortunately. And that still pains me to this day that I was not paying attention the way I should have been. And
Right.
so what I'm trying to demonstrate here is as much as our intent can be positive and good, unless we're deliberate and patient and paying attention, we're going to miss that mark.
Right.
And if we
Absolutely.
don't have time to fix and rectify that situation, because it's not going to be an instantaneous thing,
Right.
if we don't have the time to fix that, correct that, the damage is done irrevocably because I'm
Right.
never going to see that individual again. And I don't know, there's no way for me to go back into time and fix that, unfortunately. And
Right.
so it is a life lesson that I'm not going to say I'm proud about, but I'm not hurt by because it was something that had to happen in my course of my journey to reinforce things that I need to pay attention to. And
Right.
as much as I had positive and good intent, I just missed the mark. I didn't even overshoot it. I turned and did an about face and fired that arrow and completely missed.
Wow.
So as much as we say that we're seeing other people, I would argue that if we say that we're seeing people, we're probably not, because
Right. Right.
we don't know if we're seeing that person the way that they want us to be seen until they acknowledge us with the affirmative that we have seen them.
Right.
And I believe that's where so many people, especially in some of these career fields that are specifically demanding people to be open-minded, and they aren't. They
Right.
claim to be, they're in their mode and they believe that they are, but they don't realize how many times that blindfold has been wrapped around their
Right.
own eyes, and they're just not seeing it or getting it.
Right.
And I will be honest, I will never admit to seeing someone until they have acknowledged me for seeing them, because until they acknowledge that I've seen them and accepted them and acknowledged them, it hasn't happened. It's
Right.
not up to me to say, yes, I see you, Joe. It's up to Joe to say, yes, Dave sees me. And that's where I believe the error is in a lot of people's perspective.
Well, and to that point, when I introduce myself, when I meet people, and I see a lot of people that are comfortable with just, going full throttle, just blabbing out
Mm-hmm.
everything, about them. And some people are that way. But in my case, I'm reserved.
Mm-hmm.
I sit back and I do a lot of observation because it's just exactly what you said. I don't want to perceive that I understand or
Mm-hmm.
assume that they see me or I see them. I let it build, and
Yeah.
it's and people, even after they've met me and then we have several conversations, they start to learn more about me because, like you said, I allow them to see, they allow
Right.
me to see, and we
Right.
start to develop and build that relationship. And I've had people ask me, why don't you say this, why don't you do that, why didn't I know? And like you said, we got to get to that point where we give each other permission
Right.
to see each other and not just blab everything
Yeah.
about me. I had that conversation so many times with people that have known me for a couple of years, a few years, and they'll say, "Oh, I didn't know that," or "I didn't. Why didn't you tell me?" Or "I didn't see it."
Yeah.
And it's because we haven't gotten to that
Yeah.
level
We haven't
where
gotten there yet. Yeah.
we've seen each other to
One
the
person
degree
might
we
be
want to
comfortable
see.
completely divulging everything, and the other person
Absolutely,
might be much more reserved and cautious.
absolutely. So
And just
I think
because you're one of the people that loves to spew and talk doesn't mean that
right.
everyone else is.
Exactly. That's kind of where I was going because that's the perception that people have that immediately they should know all these things about you or it's not a real interaction.
Right.
And that's, to me, that's the furthest from the truth. If we want to get to that level, it is increments that we get
Yeah.
there. We know, it's just not the first time I'm going to spew everything about me,
Yeah.
and it. And so that's I like that just
Hmm.
because, again, I want to know who's genuine, who I can count on, who I
Hmm.
can believe in, who I can
Yeah.
trust,
Yeah.
that we're compatible, that we're on the
Yeah.
same page. And so that, I've had that people ask me that so many times. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that?
Mhm.
And that's just not me.
Why don't you
For,
communicate more? Why don't you talk
yeah,
more? It's like
right, right,
sometimes I just don't feel like sharing.
right,
And sometimes maybe I'm just shut down and turned off because of the situation,
right.
you know,
Absolutely.
and you have to be respected for that because that is how you feel as an individual. And
Right.
and that's part of learning your people, learning your peers, learning your colleagues, learning your subordinates, learning your
Absolutely.
leadership, and
And I,
accepting them. And either
yep.
you adapt and accept or you don't. And
Right.
that's really the way
And
it
I
is.
think that's the struggle that
Yeah.
a lot of us have is again that the expectation is that that person's going to be like me or they're going to be
Hmm.
forthcoming like me, and
Or I
that's not
want
the
them to be
case.
like me or
Right.
change or something.
It
And
it's
no one has an obligation to change.
Right. It still comes down to that. And you said it at the very beginning, building those relationships with
Yeah.
people to get to that level to where you're
Yeah.
comfortable with, saying that or doing things with them.
Hmm.
But it still just goes back to the way we started this with seeing others.
Yeah.
And the respect piece is seeing others as you expect, them to see you.
Yeah.
You give them respect and you should expect respect. And if you
Yeah.
don't get it, then
Yeah.
to move on. But
Yeah.
getting to that point is the challenge, and a lot of people don't take the time to do that. Again, they if they don't get the immediate responses they're looking for or expect, then they're done. They're ready to move on.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to add in one little final thought since we're getting close, and that is the passing judgment piece. We
right,
can
yep,
respect each other and I can respect you, but if I'm passing judgment on you for what I perceive and it's
yep,
inaccurate because that is not the way you want to be perceived, then my passing judgment is just that. It is my lack of
right,
respect for taking the time to get to know you, even if it's in just a few moments at an airport.
right,
And I believe that judgment piece is something that people often overlook. Oh, I respect so and so, or I respect these people. But if you're passing judgment on them, then you're not really respecting them
right,
because
right.
respect comes without judgment. Respect is acknowledging people for their journey.
Absolutely, who they are. Absolutely.
Yep. So
So
that's all I have to say about that.
you touched on it, and so we are toward the end of this episode. So, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I think we just need to, I think the collective we, regardless of age, gender, ethnographic, geographic stuff, we just need to pause. I think a lot of times, you see a lot of jobs advertised as a fast-paced environment. And it's like you can be as fast-paced as you want, but you still need to pause and learn a little bit about each other and respect each other
Right.
and
Yep.
see people in the way that they want to be seen.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for that, Dave, and that's absolute. I concur 100% with that. I think if we, like you said, as the collective, if we take the
Mhm.
time to get to know people, get to know their likes, their dislikes, what motivates them, what drives them,
Yeah.
you know what their fears are, what hurts
Yeah.
them, if we get to learn that and allow people to be who they are, I think we would be much better off in a lot of
Yeah.
cases. So I know this one is a little more
Mhm.
personal, but
Yeah.
it's still one of those things we have to really think about and really be um, conscious
Conscious of.
of.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
There's
yeah,
that twinsy thing, completing each
yeah.
other's. Now you're supposed to say
So
sentences.
right. So, yeah, that's what it really takes. It does take time to just kind of take a break or pause a little bit and not assume, not pass judgment, and just think about how you want to be perceived or how you
Yeah.
want to be seen, and then pass that on to people you're meeting or getting to know, that they probably have that same expectation for themselves as well. So,
Yeah.
but with that, we will go ahead and end this episode. It's been fun and
Yeah.
enjoyable topic to talk about because that's what it's all about: relationships, building
Yeah.
relationships with people, and understanding. Not that you have to pat them on the back every time you see them, but to understand
Yeah,
that their journey is different than yours, and you don't have to be accepting of it, but you should be respectful of it.
absolutely.
So
Well said.
all right, so I've jumped back in there and back out. So again, we want to thank you all for tuning in. Like I say, me and Dave get really excited about coming on here every episode. So thanks for all those returning listeners and viewers, and thanks for the new people that are tuning in. And if this is something that may not be your topic cup of tea, but somebody else's that you might know, then feel free to share. Leave comments. Let us know if there's topics or things you want to hear about. We want to definitely make this worth your while. So
Yep.
thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People. And with that, we want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.